It turns out that was all kind of theater. Most people are not allowed to exist.
And now I hate you because I'm a Marxist.
Right? But it's a real conspiracy.
I guarantee freedom of speech, but not freedom after speech. It's difficult. Professor Levine?
Hi.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to meet you here. First of all, I want to introduce yourself briefly. You're a professor at AUBG at the Department of Political Science and European Studies.
Correct.
However, you mostly go with the political science and not European studies, as far as I know.
Correct.
Is there anything I have to add here for your resume, for people to get a better understanding of who you are? So for somebody who may not know you?
I'm from New Zealand. I teach introductory courses, so everybody who goes through the poli-sci major has to survive at least one course with me. Savelli did. I teach global political economy as well, and I teach courses about post-communist states, so particularly Russia and post-Soviet Central Asia.
Interesting. So a few things to say here. First of all, New Zealand. How was life in New Zealand, and how many years have you been there, and what brought you to Bulgaria?
Well, I wasn't born in New Zealand, so I was born in Russia, like I think you were.
Interesting,
right?
Yes.
So you're from the Far East, right?
Yes, Vladivostok.
Okay. Do you know Ussurisk?
Of course.
My mother was born there.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
My father is from Rostov on the River Don.
Yes.
So very close to what at least used to be the border with Ukraine.
Sure.
Yeah, so Dad would spend summers with his grandparents over in Mariupol, which has now been largely destroyed as part of the war. Yeah, so I was born in Rostov. There's two Rostovs. There's Rostov and Rostov-на-Дону, Rostov-on-Don, but it's a bit awkward saying Rostov-on-Don.
Do you speak Russian, by the way?
Да, но не очень.
Вы говорите отлично, мне кажется.
Как получается, так себе. Yeah, so
New Zealand.
Yes.
How's that? Why from Rostov-on-Don to way there in New Zealand?
Well, yeah, so it's an immigration story. Again, a little bit like your own experience, except we went a little bit further. We ended up in New Zealand because New Zealand said yes, right? So my parents applied to a number of places. This was the 90s. The 90s, as in Russia, as in a lot of the post-communist world, were pretty chaotic. And a lot of people decided to leave. So I've spent the plurality, at this point I can't say the majority, but I've spent the plurality of my life in New Zealand. So from childhood into early adulthood.
I see.
And yeah, I mean, it's a lovely country. Its population size is about comparable to Bulgaria. It's got a lot going for it, but it's also very isolated, which in some ways is very attractive about it, because you feel a little bit, let's say, protected and distanced from the rest of the world, right? And I think Peter Thiel has actually bought citizenship in New Zealand. I mean, they wouldn't put it in those terms, but basically if you invest enough money, you can be a citizen. So we're one of his backup plans for in case the apocalypse starts, right? He thinks New Zealand has a decent chance of surviving.
Do you think so?
Do we have a decent chance of surviving?
In case of, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good.
A bit better than Europe, for example.
I think we're pretty good, pretty well positioned. Well, I mean, if you're talking about, and I'm not, you know, I'm not saying that the end of the world is coming or anything like that, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? I'd be on a, if I thought,
makes sense.
If I thought nuclear war was on the way to Europe, I would be on a plane to New Zealand. But hypothetically, right, in the event of a nuclear war, we're so far down, right, that it's about as far south as you can go, right? And you would expect, the explosions to be, the nuclear war to be happening further up north.
Yeah.
So it's quite a long way. It will be quite a long way for the radiation to drift. This is a very dark turn that we've taken just now.
All right, let's go back to Bulgaria. Why Bulgaria exactly?
Well, why not? First of all, so
Sure.
yeah, no, it's a nice place. I finished a PhD over in Melbourne, in Australia. So I was in Australia for a few years, right? So overall, I've lived in 4 countries, right, including Bulgaria, including Russia. So I finished a PhD in Australia. I turned the PhD into a book, which is kind of what you do to sort of. The point is not to produce an Oprah's Club bestseller, right? Yeah. The point is to demonstrate that you know your stuff and that you have the self-discipline to spend years, literally years, kind of obsessively writing a thesis.
What was the topic of
and then turning that into a book? U.S. policy in Central Asia, so post-Soviet Central Asia. So Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan.
Interesting.
Which is well, I think it is. A lot of people are not very aware that Central Asia is there, right? It's a little bit of a blank spot, I think, in a lot of people's minds. So when I was writing my master's in Melbourne, I was writing a mini thesis about interdependence between complex interdependence between China and Russia, right? And what's in between? You have Central Asia. And I started reading about Central Asia, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this place is so fascinating, right? There's just so much happening there, right? There's concerns about Islamic radicalism. There's this competition for influence between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow, and a few other kind of secondary actors. There's revolutions. There's a major kind of drug highway, right? Because you have Afghanistan right next door, right? And Afghanistan was accounting for up to 90% of the world's heroin exports. And those have to reach the destination, right? And one of the major routes was through Central Asia, especially Tajikistan, right? And then it would go around to Russia, and then from Russia on to sort of Northern Europe, Scandinavia, right? And then on to the rest of Europe. So there was just so much happening. Oh, and there's oil and gas there as well, right? Which is itself, I mean, the politics of that is just so fascinating, right? And the geopolitics of pipelines, and these deals that in the billions of dollars, right? And you have some really brutal dictatorships, and you have some dictatorships that are really brutal, but also kind of tragicomically insane, right? So yeah, I mean, I just became very fascinated with it.
I see. Why have you picked AUBG exactly?
It was acceptable, and I was acceptable to them.
All right.
And I thought that it would be good to be in Europe because with New Zealand, as I said, we're so isolated, right? The closest next country is Australia. You have to take a 3 to 4 hour flight to get to Australia. Any further, and it's multiple hours added on top of that, right? Here, I can get on a bus and be in Greece in 2 to 3 hours, which to a New Zealander is just mind-blowing, right? So there's that. I also felt that culturally, Bulgaria as a Slavic country and as a post-communist country would not be too alien for me, right? I mean, what's your kind of impression, Bulgarians and Russians? I think there's some overlap,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think Bulgarians are maybe Russians if you take away the grain alcohol and you replace it with wine. So like a little bit happier, maybe a little bit better at being
Kinder,
happy.
maybe kinder, maybe a little less imperialistic.
Well, that's to do with the size of the country, right?
Sure, that's true.
But yeah, so I felt that I could live here and I could be reasonably comfortable, but it was also different. So so this is the expat paradox, right? Expats want things to be convenient and they want to be comfortable, but they also want things to be different and interesting, right? So I remember I was looking at an ad at a university, I think a Western-style university in Somaliland, right, which is a region of Somalia that's supposed to be the stable part of Somalia. They're trying to become their own country, by the way. So if I'd gone there, right, that would be kind of maxing out the different and interesting. But I think comfort and convenience would have probably been pretty low, right? With Bulgaria, you have a nice balance between the two, right? It's a middle-income country. You can get whatever you want and definitely whatever you need. You have Europe right there. Of course, Bulgaria itself is Europe. I'm not implying that it's not. We're getting the euro. We're going into the eurozone. We're
Is that a good thing?
properly
in your
European. That's a tough one because there are concerns about inflation, about prices going nuts, and that has been a pattern in the past with other countries joining the eurozone. So I mean, there are advantages, right? Like just basic convenience, but yeah. I mean, in some ways, I mean, Bulgaria already, see, I'm already saying we, right? I've been here for 9 years.
Nice.
So, like, after 9 years, first of all, I would have left if I didn't like it, right? I think that itself is like the answer, right? Why Bulgaria? But yeah, after 9 years, I think a place where you're comfortable and a place that is familiar can be counted as home. I think that's a reasonable definition of home, right?
And you count Bulgaria as home?
I think I do. I think I do. In some ways, I'm an Anglophile. I'm actually a big fan of a lot of the British ways of doing things.
Interesting.
Right? Parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, secure property rights. Right? There was a case in English history where a judge ruled that the king may not, if a man is living in a hovel and there's, holes in his wall and holes in his roof, the wind may come in, the rain may come in, but the king may not come in without the man's permission. Right? That's respect for property rights.
Yeah.
And can you imagine that happening at any point in Russian history?
Nope.
No. Because the population has always been the property of the state.
The sovereign, yeah.
The sovereign.
Let's talk more a bit of a global scene. You're a professor of international relations and political science. In your humble opinion, how do you describe the world politics, the global scene right now?
Right now? Oh. Okay. Well, one of the big, the central issue, of course, is China, right?
Interesting.
Because one of the key factors, one of the key questions, one of the key drivers of global politics is the distribution of power, right? So,
from a realist perspective?
Well, from
every perspective.
From any perspective, it matters, right? Realists would say, good job remembering, by the way. But realists would say that's almost the only thing that matters. I would not agree with that, right? But you cannot ignore power. You can't. I mean, tell it to the Ukrainians,
right?
Right. So the distribution of power in the international system at any point in time is very important. And it tells us a lot about what happens in the world, right? So during the Cold War, there were two superpowers, right? And that's what drove a lot of what happened during the Cold War, the fact that there were two superpowers, right? Then we had this period of unipolarity, right? The Soviets...
10 years approximately, I would say, no? 90s to like thousands?
Yeah, maybe 15 or so. I mean, some people argue we're still in unipolarity, but it's a decline in unipolarity. There's debate about that. Part of the problem is how you measure power, because that's a whole other topic that you can go into. Part of the issue is how much do we actually know about China? Like, how reliable are Chinese statistics?
Right.
Not very, right? But yeah, so, and I mean, how much do we know about the Chinese military? Because one of the things that we learned from the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that the Russian military was actually not as formidable as it had seemed.
Yeah.
Right?
Second world army, second army in the world, as it was promoted, like.
Yeah.
We've seen how it was like.
Yeah. I mean, now of course they've learned, the Russian side has learned a lot from their mistakes, and they've been making up for a lot of their mistakes, which is historically what the Russians have done, right? They tend to be quite bad at war when they start, but then they tend to learn and get better over time if they have the opportunity to do so. But the point is, right, on the TV screen, you know, the parades, right, the military exercises, it turns out that was all kind of theater, right? It looked very impressive, but in practice there are obviously, you know, some pretty serious problems.
Yeah.
So with China, right, again, it looks on paper, it looks very formidable, right? But when was the last time that they fought a real war? When they went into Vietnam and kind of fought to a standstill, didn't even perform very well against the Vietnamese. So we don't know, right? And I hope they understand that they don't know, right? I very much hope that Xi is not overestimating the power of his military, because that's very dangerous when leaders overestimate what their military can do.
Yeah. And the result of that is a huge number of atrocities, as we've seen in the last few years, especially.
Well, I hope he's learning from Putin's mistake with Ukraine, right? I hope he saw that and he realized, okay, Putin thought it was going to be easy, that they would win in 3 days, and now, years later, right, 1 million casualties on the Russian side.
Yeah.
I hope Xi is kind of applying that, learning from that to be skeptical about his own military and his own generals. And recently he's been firing a lot of generals, and that could be either very good or very bad. Again, right, these regimes are black boxes. You're kind of looking in from the outside.
Why haven't you mentioned the United States in this topic?
Well, that's kind of does it even need to be mentioned, right? Because that's the other side of the scale, right? But we've seen the US fight. So we have a pretty good idea. And they're very good at conventional war.
Yeah.
Where they go wrong is counterinsurgency, which is very different from a conventional war. It works along totally different rules. So I wouldn't say that, you know, because they struggled against the Taliban, that automatically means that they would do poorly against China. That's very, very different things there.
If global politics, if the political scene right now could be described in a relationship status, so single, married, divorced, or it's difficult, what would you choose?
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that. Yeah. Whatever anarchy is in a relationship status.
It's difficult.
Okay.
According to some conspiracy theorists, which I'm not gonna name and I'm
Okay.
not gonna explain, one of the things that they say is that the world government, if it exists,
There's no world government.
there's no world government. Sure.
That's one of the first things that I teach. The international system is an anarchical system because there's no world
police.
government, there's no world police. And that's why that's why governments, countries that are not in nice neighborhoods like Western Europe, why they're scared and why they invest in their own military forces and find allies. Sorry, I'm lecturing.
Don't you think that there's some people, I don't know, 200 wealthiest families, Rothschilds, some nationalities that I'm not gonna mention, that there's somebody behind all this, like shadow government, controlling, pulling the strings all the time?
Well, first of all, the Rothschilds are no longer that wealthy. They're nowhere near what they used to be. I mean, this is one of the nice things about Western-style democratic capitalism is there's a lot of kind of turnover in the elite, right? So the richest man in the world right now, Elon Musk, right? Was he born to a billionaire?
As far as I know, no.
No. He was born into a well-off family, right? And they provided him with an education, right? And then he was able to use that education to create a series of companies to become the richest man in the world, right? You know, you can go to Forbes and you can look up lists of richest people, right? And there's a lot of change. There's a lot of, at the very top, there's a lot of people who came from middle-class backgrounds, who made themselves very rich, right? Steve Jobs, again. He was actually, I don't know if a lot of people know this, he was Syrian. He was of Syrian descent. He was an orphan, right? He was adopted. I hope I'm not getting this totally wrong. From what I remember, he was adopted by an American family, right? Not a billionaire family, right? Bezos, again, from a well-off background, right? So education definitely matters, right? That matters.
Is that one of the key points that come from this interview? Education matters?
Yes.
Especially higher education.
One would hope that I would give that impression. My God. But yeah, I mean, he didn't inherit Amazon, right? He was working in, I think, investment banking, and he had this idea that, oh, there's this new thing called the internet. Maybe I could use that to sell books, right?
You're a bit deviating from my question, though.
No, I'm not, because I'm talking about the nature of the elite, right? That the elite...
Of the known elite, though.
Well, is there like a hidden elite?
Well, that's what people flourishing those ideas are arguing for, yeah.
Well, I think people would have noticed if, you know, Apple was actually, or NVIDIA was actually owned by some unknown hidden party, right? Like that would leave giant gaps in the economy. People would like point at things and say like, who owns that? And we have a pretty good understanding of who owns what, right? But this idea, I mean, yeah, so, I mean, conspiracism, certainly, like, to get back to your original question, what are trends in politics that I find troubling, right? In the shorter term, short to medium term, we are seeing a rise in conspiracism in the West. I mean, it's always been with us, but it's interacting with new technology, right? I think AI is going to do incredible things for conspiracy theorists.
It already does, I think.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking it's a very wide question. So I'm just thinking about how to order my thoughts here.
All right, go ahead.
I mean, to come back to the question of a world shadow government, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, the elite, because I think this is a very important point to make. First of all, the elite in a democratic, capitalist, relatively free market system, there's a lot of upward mobility, and quote unquote ordinary non-elite people can become elite, right? This is very different, by the way, from an authoritarian system, right? I'm not going to point fingers at any particular regime, but the typical system in an authoritarian regime is you have what's called a patronage pyramid, right? At the top, you have the arch patron, right? Often, if it's a super presidential system, that person will be the president, but it might be, the king, and below that person, usually a man. So I'm going to say he, not because I'm being sexist, but I'm sorry, dictatorship in practice has been very much a man's job. Unless we go back to monarchy, because actually, Catherine the Great, wasn't she wonderful? Yeah, absolute tyrant. Yeah. But anyway, in modern authoritarian regimes tend to be run by men, right? So this person at the top will below him have in kind of pyramid-shaped networks of clients, right? Individuals who are personally loyal to him, right? Which means that their loyalty is not to the constitution of the country, not to the rule of law. They're loyal to him, right? And he, in return for their loyalty, will put them into key elite positions within his regime, right? So he takes his loyal client, makes him the Minister of Justice. In exchange, the expectation from the Minister of Justice is he'll do whatever it takes to keep the regime in power and to protect the boss. So if that means overlooking and covering up corruption, absolutely. If it means persecuting the opposition, right, putting them in prison on charges for things that they didn't actually do, absolutely. In return, he is allowed to loot the economy, right? He gets to help himself. So you have people in key positions in government. In this system, you also have people in key positions in business, right? So oligarchs who owe their position to their patron. And if they step out of line, they're going to be investigated for corruption, for financial misdeeds, and they will lose their businesses, and their businesses will instead be handed over to other clients who do a better job of following the leader's instructions, right? So in effect, it's a conspiracy, right? But it's a real conspiracy.
Interesting.
That's how these regimes work. So on paper, there's the constitution, the rule of law. They might even have elections, but everybody knows for real how the elections run, for example, right? That the media will
state control.
Only, well, it doesn't have to be directly state controlled. That's the thing, right? So if you have
through oligarchs, for example, which are once again royal to the
exactly
king.
So to the arch patron, right, who might be, say, the president.
Sure.
Right. So a couple of Vladimir Putin's earliest targets, Gusinsky and Berezovsky, they were huge media moguls in the Russian system, right? They lost their media assets, had to go into exile, right? Some of the media assets were directly absorbed by the state. Some ended up in the quote-unquote private sector or semi-private sector. So Gazprom, the Russian gas company, has a media arm. Now you would ask, why the hell is a gas company running a big portion of the media? From a business point of view, that makes no sense. From a political point of view, it makes absolute sense. So if when an election rolls around, right, in the media, it's all going to be about how wonderful the president is and how everybody who's against him is corrupt and working for the CIA and Soros and is a pedophile, right? And there's not going to be any space for independent media. And there's not going to be space for business elites who are not loyal to the pyramid. to the arch-patron. Those people are not allowed to exist in this system because then they would become a threat, right?
Yeah.
Those people would be taken out. So they would lose their businesses, they would have to go to prison, as Khodorkovsky, for example, did, or go into exile or fall out of a window.
Yeah.
In the West, right, that's a key difference. In the West, you can be Elon Musk or whoever else.
Or Kanye West.
Or Kanye. Well,
yeah,
Kanye is, that's something else. But,
Sure.
I mean, has he been...
He's saying this stuff that he couldn't say anywhere else, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, in an authoritarian regime, if an entertainer, right, if an actor, if an entertainer starts criticizing the boss, right, suddenly people are going to start canceling his bookings. His tax history is going to be investigated, right? So the point is, in a liberal system, and I mean liberal in the classical sense, right, where you have democracy, individual freedoms, property rights, something close to a free market system, entrepreneurs, ordinary people can become entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. There's no real limit to how big they can get, right?
And is that the problem?
Even without having to bend the knee to the arch-patron running the government, because their property rights are protected, and because there are courts that actually try to do a decent job, right?
Well, some liberals, and I say liberals in a modern sense.
Well, in the American sense.
American sense, yeah.
Which is wrong, but go ahead.
Sure. They would say that, no, it's wrong. It's wrong that people can get to as higher and as richer as they want, as they can. Because look at all the poor people. The richest are getting richer, the poorer are getting poorer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very popular statement. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. First of all, where, right? Like, if we're talking about globally, over the past 30, 40 years, we've seen hundreds of millions of people around the world pulled out of extreme poverty, right? In places like China, in places like India, but in a number of other places as well. And that's very much thanks to economic globalization. It's thanks to trade, thanks to investment, thanks to technologies coming in from the major centers of technological innovation, particularly North America, right, East Asia, Europe to some extent. So a lot of the poor are much better off than they used to be. And they're living longer, and they're less hungry than they used to be. Historically, poverty has been the norm, right? Historically, almost everybody is supposed to be poor and sick. And half your children are supposed to die before the age of 5. I mean, that's one of the reasons why people are having fewer children. You can actually expect your children to survive, which is a very wonderful thing, I think. Yeah, I mean, one thing to talk about is, okay, what do we mean by poor? Are we talking about absolute poverty or relative poverty? Because those are very different things. Because if you become twice as rich tomorrow, and I become 10 times as rich, in an absolute sense, we've both become richer.
Yeah.
In a relative sense, your life standards has improved, mine has skyrocketed, so the gap between us has widened.
And now I hate you.
Well,
because I'm a Marxist.
Certain people will try to convince you to hate me,
Yeah.
right? Some people from the far left or from the far right.
Sure.
Will say that I got where I am on the basis of sneaky, dishonorable behavior.
Yeah.
Right? In my point of view, I just like to see people doing better. But yeah, I mean, I think this kind of politics of envy is really, really toxic, and often based on very bad economics. But economics is not the easiest thing to communicate to the public. It's much easier to say to the public that there's a group of people, and that group of people has rigged everything in their favor, and that all of the public's problems are due to that group of people.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, the mayor-elect of New York, Mamdani, right, in his campaign, was always smiling. He looked like such a nice young man. The moment he gets elected, he gives a victory speech, which is just this angry rant, right, class warfare speech.
Yeah.
The smiles are gone, right? Now, what's interesting is he's of Indian descent. His father's family, they lived in Uganda, right? There was a sizable Indian population in Uganda. And they were one of these the Indians in Uganda were one of these highly successful, overachieving minorities, right? We find examples of this around the world, right? So Lebanese in Latin America, right? So-called middleman minority, right? Overachieving there. The Indians in a lot of places, the Chinese outside of China. I mean, one of the great ironies, right, is that the Chinese in mainland China kept themselves horrifically poor up until they started to embrace capitalism. Outside of China, the Chinese communities did so well, right? So in places like Indonesia, in places like Malaysia, Jews are, of course, the kind of the classical example, but not the only example, right? So these minorities that do very well. What happened to the Indians in Uganda? The politics of envy. They had a dictator named Idi Amin. He decided that the Indians were rich, therefore they must be doing something bad. They must be stealing money. So he forced them to leave the country and stole their property, right? And of course redistributed it to his loyal clients, because that's how an autocrat keeps power, right?
He had a famous quote, "I guarantee freedom of speech, but not freedom after speech," right?
I think, yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds like Idi Amin, yeah. So, I mean, that's the politics of envy, right? And it's very useful for a politician. You know, for Idi Amin, this worked very well. And it worked very well for his friends. But in addition to, of course, being a horrible crime against the Indians, it also ended up harming most of the Ugandans. Because what we see over and over again, when the politics of envy wins and it's racialized, and people turn on an overachieving, successful minority, and those people are chased out, that society suffers. That society's economy suffers, because those people were actually doing useful things, it turns out.
I want to bring up another conspiracy theory, excuse me for that, because I think it's important.
Unfortunately, it is important. I wish it wasn't.
Yes.
And, oh, sorry, can I just say one thing about the world government idea? Okay, I'll say two. I'm a professor, so one thing
you can.
One thing turns into two things. In some ways, it's a comforting idea, the idea that there's a hand on the wheel, right? That there is some kind of plan behind everything.
And someone to blame, right? And
someone, well, that's also nice, to be able to blame somebody. But I mean, if you look at the world, as I said, it's an anarchical world, which is not exactly the same thing as a chaotic world, but chaos does erupt in multiple parts of the world, right? And for decades, we've been living with the ability of our governments to kill all of us multiple times over via nuclear weapons, right? So, and the idea that we could just stumble into a nuclear war is a terrifying idea. So I can understand people wanting to believe that behind the scenes, everything is planned, right? And so the super rich, ultra elite are not going to allow, for example, to get a pandemic really out of hand, right? Or allow nuclear war to really get out of hand, right? They'll be just, controlled crises, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's comforting. I think it's taking the place of religion in some ways, right? Because, I mean, that's another major trend, that you have large parts of the world becoming more secularized, including parts of the Muslim world, right? And the Catholic world. So in the past, people could kind of count on a higher power to look out for them, right? You could say, okay, bad things happen, but there's a kind of point behind it, and at least humanity will survive, right? The idea that nobody's driving, nobody's in charge, right? There's nobody upstairs to answer your calls, your prayers. That's a scary idea. So they invent grand conspiracies to take the place of supernatural forces, right? To give a human face, because that's what religion is about. It's about giving a human face to these...
To hope, basically.
Yeah, well, to bad things as well, right? So, I mean, the Romans and the Greeks having a god of war, right? War is a disaster, right? But if at least there's a supernatural entity behind it that kind of looks like a human being, at least sort of thinks like a human being, that's a little bit more comforting.
Like a meaning behind all that.
Yeah, there's a meaning there, right? As opposed to this just being something that just happens. And a lot of what happens is something that just happens, so-called emergent outcomes, right? Like in The Prisoner's Dilemma, where both prisoners, you might remember this one or not,
I do.
both prisoners end up making what seems like a bad decision, but it's actually kind of a rational decision, but then they end up with a really bad outcome, right? And nobody planned that outcome, they just made it happen. And this is one of the great insights from the classical liberal tradition, that so much of what happens is an emergent outcome. It's a result of many people making different decisions and doing different things, and then all of that comes together and produces a result that nobody actually planned for and nobody actually expected, right? So language is a good example, right? Because most languages were not created by a bunch of guys sitting in a room and writing things down. Language just kind of evolves organically with people trying out sounds, right? So a lot of what happens in the world is this kind of emergent outcome, right? And of course, people look at that and they want to, instead of seeing events as coming up from the bottom, right? They want to imagine that there's some kind of higher authority which is planning everything, right? And which is making everything happen the way it happens.